Welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. I apologize for not making a few videos over the past couple of days. I was staffing a Model Congress conference here in Boston, and so I was completely booked and busy staffing a committee for quite some time up until yesterday, in which I came back to campus, and now I'm back integrated in my college life. With that being said, it allows me more time to make videos for you guys, and thus today's video's topic is going to be on the 2024 Senate elections after, thankfully, for the past couple of days, I've had the opportunity to see a lot of new polls that have been released that show drastic differences between President Biden's expected performance in battleground states and where Senate Democrats currently are amongst the same electorate. Now, you might be able to tell from the title of this video and from, of course, just this very early on intro that this topic really is going to show exactly how much better Democrats are doing in the Senate level when compared to the presidential. And while that is a double-edged sword, at least the takeaway here I think that Democrats are happy with and that Republicans are also happy with is that right now, it looks like there might genuinely be a lot of party splitting when it comes down to the presidential election and the Senate election. But that's good news for Senate Democrats because it means they are starting off from a very high point. It equally is good news for Democrats overall across the country because it means that President Biden weighing them down doesn't actually seem to be taking too much of an effect. Now, we had a bit of a question about this back in 2022 when President Biden was so exceptionally unpopular, down double digits nationwide, that Democrats actually did quite well when it came down to the House elections, the Senate elections, and did phenomenal when it came down to the governor elections. Now, what we had known from years prior, for example, in 2010, when President Obama was down about 5 points in terms of popularity, Democrats lost net 63 seats in the House of Representatives. In 2022, Democrats lost just around 10. In the Senate elections in 2010 and 2014, Republicans made massive gains, flipping back the United States Senate in 2014 and flipping back the largest Democratic House majority in decades in 2010. And so, of course, that was monumental. And although President Obama was unpopular by 5 to 6 points, it translated to a 7 to 8 point victory for the GOP across the country. But of course, that wasn't the case in 22. And so then came into this question. Does President Biden's approval, does the opinion of the American public on President Biden actually sway voters when it comes down to the standard issue of Democrat versus Republican? And right now, we don't really have, data that tells us that the national numbers don't exactly predict that. You see, when we're taking a look at our, nationalized data, for instance, if we look at the generic ballot for the 2024 election, they look very similar to where we are in Trump versus Biden. I mean, I can take a look and show you the congressional ballot here has Trump, the Biden, Republicans up by 2.5. The national one has Trump up by 2.1. But what is so exceptionally fascinating and what I think actually could have been a great indicator for 2022 and was in a way, even though it did overestimate Republicans quite tremendously, is that statewide polling does not seem to be matching this national swing away from the Democratic Party. Although the general election data and the generic ballot might be indicating the same thing, what we see in these battleground states is absolutely not that. And so in the states we are going to be talking about, states like Montana, states like Ohio, and Republicans are definitely going to win West Virginia. That was the current composition of the Senate map. This is where we are now. We are looking at states like Wisconsin, states like Pennsylvania, states like Arizona and Nevada, where Democrats are, doing well in the Senate elections, but not so much on the presidential. But when you look at these high-level national takeaways, the ones that you see on Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, that are saying Biden is down, therefore Democrats also must be down. This video, I think, will show you by the end of it that that absolutely is not an absolute case or necessarily true in a lot of these cases. And so, starting off strong, we have the state of Arizona, where we have a three-way race, a head-to-head matchup between Kari Lake, Ruben Gallego, and Kyrsten Sinema. Now, we don't know exactly if this is going to be our matchup here. The good thing is, too, for Democrats, they lead in the polls where it is a head-to-head matchup as well. But there is the speculation that Kyrsten Sinema, the incumbent independent senator from Arizona, might be running as an independent candidate in this race and could consequently split the party vote from the Democratic Party. Now, I personally don't think that's going to happen. What I think we are going to see, though, is that the Democratic Party will be in a position where they will do well in this state, but it really just depends on how the vote splits. This is also suggesting that Democrats could win even with Kyrsten Sinema on the ballot. There are plenty of independent voters who genuinely like Kyrsten Sinema because they see her as bipartisan. That's why this pretty much splits down in the way that Arizona's electorate is made up of. But on the presidential level, Donald Trump demolishes Joe Biden in this state by a whopping 4.7%, larger than Biden's victory in 2020 and larger than Trump's victory in 2016. That's big for the Republican Party. That's big for President Trump. But what they're lacking in is a significant lead in the Arizona Senate election. And while this may seem like an anomaly, how could an electorate that chooses Trump by 5 also choose Democrats by 5 in the Senate election? This story is being told all across the country. Take a look at the state of Wisconsin. Donald Trump leads Joe Biden here by 1.2%, but in the most recent poll, Tammy Baldwin, the Democratic incumbent, leads by 7. The Hill and Emerson say Trump leads by 3, but Baldwin leads by 7. That's a 10-point swing. In Arizona, Democrats lead by 5, but Donald Trump leads by 5. That is also a 10-point swing. Looking over at the state of Pennsylvania, Joe Biden leads here by 0.6%. And you might be thinking, okay, if Biden's up by 0.6, the Democratic nominee probably is around the same. The Democratic incumbent, he's going to be riding potentially on the coattails of President Biden. But it looks like that actually might be opposite of what's happening here. Bob Casey, the Democratic incumbent from Pennsylvania, leads by 9 points across the state, when the President Biden leads by less than a point. Nearly a 10-point swing. Moving over to the state of Ohio, Donald Trump maintains a 9.5% advantage over Joe Biden, but in the Senate election, Sherrod Brown, the Democrat, leads by 3. And so far, we've gone through a bunch of battleground states. States like Arizona, states like Wisconsin, states like Pennsylvania, states like Ohio, which are showing us 7, 8, 9, 10-point swings from where they are on the presidential level, and Democrats are consistently outpacing. In some other states, too, we see this happen. In Nevada, Donald Trump leads by 8 points across the state, 8 percentage points, 6 in the most recent Hill and Emerson College poll. But in the race between Jackie Rosen and Sam Brown, who is the presumptive Republican nominee here, Jackie Rosen leads by 2. Not phenomenal, but nonetheless, nearly a 10-point swing from the Hill and Emerson College poll, and a 10-point swing when compared to the average. Moving over to the state of Montana, Joe Biden is losing here to Donald Trump by 21.5%. When it comes down to the Senate election, get this, Jon Tester leads by 7. That is nearly a 30-point swing. And so while the high-level takeaway from the general election and the generic congressional vote polling data might seem to say that the nation is in line in congressional elections as they are on the presidential level, I am here to tell you and to show you that that is not the case. That was the miscalculation that Democrats and Republicans alike made in 2022 that guaranteed a massive victory for Republicans in the House of Representatives. I mean, when you take a look at this map here, the numbers 222 to 213 might ring a bell because that's exactly what the House map was back in 2020 when Democrats won the national popular vote by 4 to 5 points, whether it was the presidential or the congressional. And so when it swings in favor of the Democratic Party, Republican Party, Republicans won the popular vote here by 3 points across the country. And yet it resulted in just a net gain of 10 seats. Because although the nation might have shifted to the right, just as we are seeing relative to the 2020 presidential, it does not mean that every single state will. Because as I am showing you, that simply is not the case. And it was that miscalculation that made Republicans believe that Kari Lake was definitively going to win the Arizona governor's race, or that Derek Schmidt was going to dethrone Laura Kelly as the popular Democratic incumbent in a Trump plus 16 state, that Tudor Dixon was going to pull an upset because the polls showed Gretchen Whitmer ahead by a singular percentage point, only for her to lose by 10 points more. That in states like New Mexico and New York, we would see a level of an upset that would give Republicans a victory. The Republicans were going to flip Oregon. That Doug Mastriano was going to pull out a strong one in Pennsylvania. That Tim Michaels was a shoo-in in Wisconsin. What happened? What happened was relying too much on these nationalized polls. and ignoring what was happening on the statewide level. It also didn't help that a lot of these polls significantly underestimated Democrats in the 2022 elections. What did the polls in Arizona say? You can go back on Real Clear Politics to check all of this. Blake Masters was supposed to win. Herschel Walker was supposed to win. Dr. Oz was supposed to win. Adam Laxalt was supposed to win. Had that happened, Republicans would be at 53 to 47. In the governor polls, Kari Lake was supposed to win. Derek Schmidt was supposed to win. The polls said Whitmer would win by 1. She won by 11. When you take a look at the numbers in Oregon, it was supposed to be close, and in some cases, the Republicans were winning. Shapiro was supposed to win by 6 or 7. He won by 15. In Wisconsin, Tim Michels was supposed to win. All across the country, these high-level polls were still matching some of the statewide polls. But I think you did see some levels of movement in the statewide polls that showed the Democrats were at stronger points than Democrats were nationally. These individualized candidates and, elected incumbents or, propped up Democratic nominees in many cases were more highly regarded than President Biden, than the national numbers. And I think the big takeaway here is that regardless of how President Biden is doing in the general election, the voters still like their Democratic Senate candidates. The voters still like Jon Tester. The voters still like Jackie Rosen, not Mark Kelly, Ruben Gallego, right? Tammy Baldwin, Bob Casey, Sherrod Brown. These people are in these positions where they could do very well in the Senate elections because they've built a reputation across the state. They've campaigned very strongly. They've allowed themselves a cushion that is not at all seemed to be infringed upon by President Biden's unpopularity, unelectability in some cases. I mean, in some of these states like, Montana, there is no case to be made that Joe Biden is electable in that state. But there is absolutely a case to be made that his Democratic counterpart and former colleague in the United States Senate, yes, Jon Tester and Joe Biden served in the U.S. Senate at the same time, that he could go on to win this Senate election on the same ballot that President Biden is losing by 22 points. These 10 to 30 point swings, depending on the state, really display the true strength and ability of these Democratic Senate candidates. Democrats did something right in maintaining this dominating presence by these electoral juggernauts that they call incumbents in these states. Bob Casey with a family dynasty, Tammy Baldwin with a strong electoral track record, Sherrod Brown and Jon Tester with high levels of favorability, Ruben Gallego, who forced a United States Senator to shift to independent if she wanted to have any chance at being reelected to the U.S. Senate, Jackie Rosen, who defeated a Republican incumbent in Nevada by a margin larger than Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden's margin of victory against someone who was largely perceived as a moderate, as someone who was more close to the center and arguably more electable. What Democrats did correctly in many of these states was win over the masses. And the state of Michigan, with its Democratic incumbent here, Elisa Slotkin, you are also seeing is doing significantly better than where Donald Trump and where Joe Biden is on the Michigan level. I mean, it is literally all of these states in which you see that Democrats across the country, when you nationalize them, when you throw them under the umbrella that they are solely and only associated with President Biden, it may seem that if Biden is to lose these states, that Democrats will too. But that is not what is going to happen this November. Now, I think the last point that I also will take away from this goes to show that President Biden is by no means out of the running or should be counted out whatsoever. If anything, what these Senate polls show is that there absolutely is an appetite for Democratic leadership and Democratic reelection, depending on who the candidate is, but that Biden has to win these voters back because they aren't opposed to voting for a Democrat. They very clearly want to vote for a Democrat depending on who it is and depending on who they are running against. And I think by the time we get closer to November, at some point, the Biden campaign, I think, will start taking notes from what Bob Casey, Tammy Baldwin, Jon Tester, all these winning candidates in statewide races, in races where Donald Trump is expected to win alongside a Democratic senator. And they are going to figure out what these Democrats are doing right, what they need to replicate, and how they can move forward and win future races. Because right now, although President Biden's numbers aren't strong by any metric, they aren't doing nearly as well as they were back in 2020 or even Hillary Clinton was in 2016. The appetite and the enthusiasm is there, but the Biden campaign needs to tap into it. But what this shows is that although President Biden may be unpopular, Democrats still hold a very, very strong chance at victory, regardless of what happens at the top of the ticket. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. I do not know why this didn't open up for you guys. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.